for anyone that's been following Clipping's work over the past 5, 6 years at this point, you would absolutely know that they are one of the more ambitious and creative and interesting rap groups around right now. They've very much come a long way since 2013's Mid City, where they were mostly working with industrial hip hop and some noisy elements in their music too. They carried that on their self-titled album again, which they kind of refined and made it a bit more accessible, I guess you could say. Then Splendor and Misery was a complete different breed. And once again, we have had a complete change. Unsurprisingly, with this new album, there existed an addiction to blood, which is once again this concept album, which is very much indebted to the genre horrorcore. I mean, you can't really shake it off with the way that David is going really explicitly into detail with a lot of these tracks, which is honestly when he's at his best, when he's so vivid and detailed and descriptive. You can clearly tell that his acting career, has really influenced his music as well, because combining those really overly dramatic elements, you get this really, really interesting album here. Each track having its own bloody and gory depiction of some kind of murder scene, just really gives this album this really eerie and creepy vibe to it that you just can't really shake away because of the way, again, David raps and the production that's backing him as well. So in theory, this album really should be just some kind of album of the year contender, similarly to the Angel Olsen album that came out recently too. It just seemed like it was there waiting for me to slap like a 9 out of 10 on it, just based purely on the fact of how good it could be. And just once again, I'm just not really digging this all that much. You're probably thinking, Ryan, why are you so negative? But I don't do it on purpose. I'm not really feeling so many of these tracks. The thing that just drags this down completely, I think, is most of the musical elements. I want to commend Clipping for being as creative as they are with their production, but it doesn't really always translate that well to great music. Now, I may as well go into detail with the tracks that I do think work well. Nothing Is Safe, I think, is a pretty interesting track. It's got that kind of like really spacey cinematic production that's backing it. In the second half of this track, it does kind of start to rise in a really interesting way. But I think it's one of those tracks where on first listen it does kind of grip you in a really eerie and strange way, but then the more you listen to it, it kind of loses its impact. There's something about it when I first heard it that made me just feel like something big was gonna happen, something crazy was about to take over and just completely destroy me. But now, like with 4 or 5 listens down the line, the track has kind of lost its spark. The track that is holding up well for me is The Show, though. I think the bouncy flair to the production, paired with David's rapping, is just really, really off-kilter and strange. The lyrics and the music just aren't matching up at all, but I think it actually works in its favor because there's something about how happy it kind of sounds, and then he's just talking about this show where people go to watch people fucking die. It's really weird and twisted, and I actually think it works incredibly well. Because you can go all eerie and spooky as you want, but that can kind of wear off. But I think when you use this kind of like twisted, sickening humor, I personally think it really sits well with you a lot better. It's like the scene in Reservoir Dogs where Stuck in the Middle with You comes on, and it's just so out of place, and it comes in just such a sick and twisted scene that you're just never going to forget because it is just so dark and funny in a weird way. And I think they actually could have used more of that on this album. I think that would have just been way better. However, though, that isn't to say there aren't other good tracks, because that would be wrong. Story 7, every time they do a story track, it floors me. It just always floors me. I think they utilize this idea so well, and the fact that they've kept it up on nearly every release they've done up until this point really shows like the nice continuation of something, and it never really fails either. It's like this own little mini series within a series. Like, you're always waiting to see what they're going to do on the next story. I mean, I'm anticipating what they'll do on the next one already because they're always so good. The story depicting this really weird scenario where this guy is just murdering this woman, that's that's as straightforward as it can get, honestly. Probably one of the best tracks using the horrorcore element here, because again, he's just straight to the point with his lyrics. The refrain of him saying, Cynthia is choking on her blood now. With that really sharp production, kind of piercing your ear, it just is really uncomfortable to listen to. And that's exactly what they're going for. They're making you uncomfortable because that is what they're doing with this album. But unfortunately, it's not like every track makes me feel that way, really. I mean, the track He Dead doesn't really work for me. I think that hook of can you feel it? Oh, he did. Can you feel it? Oh, he did. Like, it just gets so boring and redundant. There's no impact, there's no punch to what's being said here. And it's a major shame because I've mentioned already, there are two examples of where it really, really works. All in Your Head to me just sounds like a mess musically, and the feature kind of feels out of place. I just get nothing out of this track. I just get nothing out of it. And again, it's a shame when there are points on the album where they really get it completely right. But it just flows in such an inconsistent way the whole time. The whole album doesn't feel that cohesive to me at all. Maybe that's just something that I'm experiencing personally, but yeah, the flow of the album just kind of feels a bit mismatched at times for me. Blood of the Fang, though, is an interesting moment where the idea of violence is flipped the other way. This time around it's violence towards black people and the history of black people in America. But he uses the sort of Malcolm X ideology of the way to fight the violence would be to use violence against it, because the only way it's ever going to end is if that's what we do. And David's flow and delivery on this one is just so much more aggressive than so many of the other tracks. You can tell this is a moment for him where he's incredibly passionate about what he's saying. It's something he truly believes in. But I do kind of think it's a bit of an interesting moment on the album, because quite often throughout the album the violence is depicted in a way that's incredibly gruesome and not something that you want to encourage, whereas this is a track where it's kind of flipping that a little bit. So, you know, ideologically you could disagree with that because it is flawed, to be honest, but I think it's an interesting moment for the album itself. I was never quite fully on board with the track featuring Benny the Butcher, mostly because I think his feature is just okay. He's getting a lot of buzz at the moment. He's on the rise as a rapper right now. I've yet to really get that much out of his work, but he fits the song in a bit of an odd way for me. Like, the production isn't quite matching the tone of his voice. It's just a bit of an odd track for me. I've never really quite understood the hype for this one. The track Attunement doesn't really work for me that much really either. I've always liked their mesh of noise, industrial and hip hop, but I just find the instrumental overtaking David's voice completely on this one. He's just being smothered by it, to be honest, and the instrumental itself doesn't sound that good really. Yeah, I don't know, just moments like this I'm just not really invested in. And following that we have the final track, Piano Burning, which is this 18-minute track that is just the sound of a piano burning. It's not a work composed by clipping though, it's composed by an artist from the 60s, I believe, named Annie Lockwood. I think it's an interesting way to end off the album because it depicts this idea that the piano is already burning, it's beyond repair, way beyond repair, I guess you could say, and the violence is never ending. It's past the point of being able to repair what we've already broken and messed up. There's nothing to salvage, basically. It's a bit of a doom and gloom way to look at things, I guess, but you know, it's not really the album filled with happy, cheery smiles and yay, woo, wee, yay. And while, yeah, it fits the concept really well, look, I like long pieces of music. I like musique concrète, but Do I want to listen to this for 18 minutes? I mean, sure, it's cool the first time, but do you need to keep listening to it again and again? I mean, look, if you do, that's okay, but for me, I don't really need to listen to it multiple times. Would it not just be best to have shortened it? Maybe include David doing like a spoken word piece to kind of wrap things up, or maybe just end things off in a really, really haunting way? That could have been cool, but you're just kind of slapping a piece of music that's already been made at the end of your album, not really doing anything with it and just leaving it there. It just doesn't really interest me. I think a spoken word piece would have been fantastic, honestly. Like just having his voice speak over this piano crackling, the sounds of the burning, I think would have been perfect to end this album. Obviously, it didn't end that way, but just what we got instead, it just, I don't know, I'm just not really that interested. So yeah, unfortunately, there were just so many things that really didn't work for me on this album. Mainly in the music and the production. I think the horrorcore elements were actually utilized really well. There are some really interesting lyrics I've talked about throughout the album too. I can pick and choose a couple of tracks that I've already mentioned, the story track and the show. Definitely really major highlights in Clipping's entire discography actually, but quite a lot of this album doesn't really entertain me. They really do keep pushing themselves with these concepts and I applaud it and I encourage more of it, but I just want to grasp something from the music and I'm just not quite getting it. Unfortunately, a 5.5 out of 10 from me. Yeah, it's a bit of a disappointment, but hey, I know so many people are loving this, so that's good. Let me know what you think, if you are loving it, if you're about the same range as I am. If you agree, disagree, thank you for watching. Let me know. Subscribe. Have a good day. Goodbye.